I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Morganton City Council on February 1st, 2021 to order. Normally, we reserve the first few minutes for public addresses. Kelly, has anyone signed up?
No, sir.
Okay, at this time, we'll ask people to stand, and I'll ask Councilman Butch McSwain to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next, we're going to have an invocation and pre-recorded by the Reverend Mike Chandler from Summit Church. Chad, if we'll run the invocation.
Hey everybody, I'm Mike Chandler, pastor at Summit Community Church here in Morganton. Just want to pray this evening for our city council, decisions that need to be made and the direction we're moving in the middle of all the pandemic and things that are facing us. We want to thank these leaders for what they do and pray for God's direction as we move forward as a city of Morganton. And as we do, let's pray. Father in heaven, we're so blessed and grateful to be in your presence. We're so grateful and blessed to be here in Morganton, in Burt County, to live here, to serve you, to be a part of your world. And Father, I pray for the city council as they move forward and decisions that need to be made, and as they seek direction. Father, I pray that you just intervene and guide us in the ways you want us to go, guide us in the things we need to do. So Father, guide our hearts, guide our minds, that our feet and hands might follow you in what you want us to do. We do love you, and we praise you. Pray for your blessings now in this meeting and time together. In Jesus' name, amen.
Okay. Next on the agenda, introduction of council. To my far right, Wendy Cato, Mayor Pro Tem, Chris Jernigan, City Council, Louis Vina, our City Attorney. I'm Ronnie Thompson, your Mayor, Sally Sandy, our City Manager, Butch McSwain, City Council, Chris Hawkins, City Council, Kelly Russell, our Recording Secretary, our interpreters for the deaf, Daniette Stillman-Bridges, and Ernest Williams IV. Our first order of business was to deliver a service pin to Jeff Beach, who worked in Public Works. He could not be with us, but he's been with our city 20 years. Sally, would you like to say anything?
We just appreciate Jeff's service, and we'll be sure to get him his pen.
Next item on our agenda is our financial report from Jessie Paris, our Finance Director. She'll come forward and give us, Council, I believe you have something on your desk, and I believe we've got slides for this presentation.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. So normally we do this update. Either we do it normally in January or December with our audit, and then sometimes we'll wait for it. And like last year, my first year, we did it at our capital workshop, which we probably, large gathering, so we thought we'd do it at a council meeting. So what's ahead? So we're gonna do a general fund overview. We're gonna dive a little bit deeper into tax collection, or ad valorem, our largest revenue. Then we'll talk just over general fund revenues, then enterprise funds as a whole, utility billing, and then kind of how we move forward for the rest of the year. So I know this is a lot of numbers, so I tried to concise it as much as I can. Most important thing to look at really are the percentages on the right. The left center column is this year compared to last year. And if you just kind of take a breeze, we're doing pretty well comparatively. Now those are budget to actual percentages, so that doesn't really take into account that this year's budget started out lower than a normal year. So we're in line with a lower start would be the best way for me to describe that. Just to draw your attention to a couple things so that are larger gaps, specifically unrestricted intergovernmental revenue as a category. That's really like our utility sales tax, ABC still go in that, and so that is kind of what that category is. And then if you draw your attention to other taxes category, that's talking about carbon city tax, privilege tax, and sales tax, which we'll talk about later is doing pretty well. So that is kind of, that number specifically is what driving that 50% up. Another two to take interest in is interest earned. So obviously, we were assuming that interest income would be lower this year than in normal years. Given that, even so, are tracking lower than even our conservative budget number. That's probably not going to get better. It's not a huge revenue for the general fund, but it is normally about $250,000 to $300,000, and we probably won't get even close to that. I mean, quite frankly, we'll probably make around 50 if I were to guess, in just the general fund. And then other revenue is lower, and that really is just private donations, and that can go, I mean, that's just varying for year to year. Then overview of expenditures. The expenditures grouping that you see is our budgetary standard that we do. So general government is everything not in the other 4 categories, basically. So a lot of admin, finance, HR, that kind of stuff. And most of the varying in here is capital purchases and timing of when we purchase those. So if we have large purchases that we do in capital, and we purchase them at the beginning of the year because it has a long lead time, that can kind of drive that percentage up. As an overall, we're doing really well on our general fund expenditures. All the departments have not only did great in the budget process by us limiting a lot. They've done really well limiting a lot within those confines. And so that is a very positive outlook so far. So this is just a snapshot of some of our key revenues that we kind of track throughout the year most closely. As I stated earlier, investment earnings aren't doing great, not necessarily something just alarming, but they're doing what we expected them to do, quite frankly. Utility sales tax, recreation is a very positive note. Obviously, we had a very limited summer, and Rob did a great job still being able to schedule things, and those are pretty on track with just our best guess of what we were going to be able to do. And we're still probably going to get to have somewhat of a spring season, so that's really great news. Once again, that was just a shot in the dark on the budget. We didn't know if by this time last year we were going to get to have some type of shows. Sharon's kind of looking at a couple maybe virtual things, but again, the loss in revenue and is 100% matching us trying to save on the expenditure side, and we're doing pretty well on that. Powellville is doing great, and our best guess as well. We're about 50%, which is what we wanted to be this year. And we've able to pave Bouchelle Street and a lot of other things that we wanted to do, and have a little bit left over what we may be able to add in some small things. So that's great news as well. Sales tax and ad valorem tax we can talk about a little bit deeper. So ad valorem is our largest largest revenue in the general fund. Year over year, if I look at the last 5+ years, we collect anywhere from 98.5% to 99% every year. If I would have given you this chart on the left as of December 31st, we were about 1.5% behind comparative to last year, which doesn't sound like a large percentage, but that is a large amount of revenue to a $10 million number. As of January 6th, which is our last day before second notices, we always get a large influx, and we did. And so we kind of caught right back up, which is great. Big difference between normal years and this year is making up that 7% is going to take a significant amount more effort. We have a larger second notice listing than normal, and these are probably the people who honestly have been hit hard and they can't make it. So this is going to take significant more effort to get back up to that 99%. And we'll just have to watch it and keep close and probably give an update in a couple months just to see how we're doing on that. So sales tax is also one of our largest revenues. It's largely driven by a percentage of total county sales tax collections. This was also just kind of starting the dock on what we're going to do. Good thing is people are spending money, and this is our first year we really are getting to capture a large portion of online sales, specifically Amazon. So that kind of came at good timing. And as you can see, so the orange color, which kind of looks funky on my screen. I think mine's, yeah, orange, is this year. Blue color is last year. And we're tracking higher than we did last year, which we were on this growth spurt of about a 1.5% year-over-year growth in sales tax just from all of our economic development. And we're kind of catching back up to it, except for, next slide, talks about sales tax refunds. And those are processed at the state level as all of it. And those are running significantly far behind than last year, which is not great news. This number is relatively consistent year over year. So we're tracking at about $100,000 less of sales tax refunds being processed. Sally and I have talked about this at length. We both don't have a great feeling that just doesn't mean there's less refunds. They just haven't hit us yet. And again, that's kind of a time will tell. We could be wrong, and we really don't know. But it's definitely something to watch and not get super over eager about where sales tax revenue is at. So switching to utility funds, water, wastewater, electric, and Compass. They are so great to the point where I ran these twice as I was putting them in the graph because it was the exact same numbers and I thought I was doing something wrong and pulling different years or something. So overall, once again though, those percentages are based off budget to actuals each year. So this doesn't really get to tell you the story about how this year's budget started significantly lower than year over year, which isn't something we can keep up, right? I mean, we can work with it, but it's something that will happen. It's not something we can just do every year without fixing something permanently if this keeps up. So expenditures, same thing, right? We're doing great. Higher numbers in percentage of expenditures is not necessarily operating expenses. It's capital expenditures that get lumped in here and kind of skew the percentage. But operating expenditures wise, we're doing less than 50% roughly, and we're halfway through the year. Again, everyone's done a great job at containing what they can contain. So this is a new slide that we would not have probably talked about other than a COVID year. The blue is 2020, and I'm saying 2020 because it's months from September through December. Those months are important because we didn't start doing cutoffs again through the executive order until September. That was our first month since March. So September through December, blue is this year, orange is last year. We're doing roughly double the amount of cutoffs that we run the first time. Going to the second pie chart, that's the amount of cutoffs that actually get closed. So they get 7 days and they didn't come in and pay after their cutoff notice. And then that's the actual dollar amount of utility account we had to close that we lose. That $27,000 is not coming back. So.
And those aren't non-pays, those are
Correct.
accounts closed, no more business with the customer.
And that also includes electric and water accounts. And the most important thing here is this isn't an alarming amount of money, right? $27,000 and a couple $1 million of a budget isn't huge. Problem is that money, those accounts were still closed with a large influx of money coming from utility assistance programs. That had a large influx of money that was one time. So we've gotten through almost a year of COVID. Our issue is we've really only gotten through 6 months of a new budget year, but all of those factors aren't forward. You know, we had a CARES Act amount of funding that we got. That's one time, we think. The utility assistance program money that the city was able to give them, that in turn were helping people pay their bills, that we don't know, that may not come back. So this, while it is something to watch, it's really hard. We don't have enough data yet to see exactly how this impacted us moving forward, more than 6 months, more than a year, and how people are going to recover and move on from this. Jenny gave me some information right before I walked in here. So our payment plans, which I guess I'll go back. Payment plans were a part of the executive order the governor issued in March. We had, starting those in August, we had to make them for a minimum of 6 months, which we've talked about. Some of those customers, depending on when they were, so some of them were able to maybe make 1 month, they couldn't catch up, so really it got extended into February. This will be our first month of people who didn't start on a payment plan for specifically not paying from March to July. Not saying when we have payment plans every month, it's a normal occurrence. Our system is not meant to track that large amount of payment plans over that long period of time. We don't do 6-month payment plans. So we also don't keep up with it really year over year. It's just, and it's really kind of the way we track it is difficult. But I can tell you, so we have 94 active payment plan amounts as of today, and a total dollar amount of roughly $7,500. From what I've talked to Jenny and her experience here, that is more than we ever have, and it's a higher dollar amount than we ever have. Good news is a payment plan is a good thing, right? It helps them affordably make something that they couldn't play. So we've had a pretty good success rate on people actually finishing their payment plans and us not having to make it all due at one point because they've missed it. So I'm hoping to see that number drastically reduce after this month, and it's not related to making 6 months worth of payments over time. So moving forward, honestly, this isn't it's not as grim as maybe someone was thinking to have a mid-COVID year update. But most importantly, keeping in mind that where budget to actual is fine, our main issue is our budget was severely limited. And that is not an ongoing financial management tool we can keep up with. The next 6 months of the year, we'll continue to practice conservative spending and not get overly optimistic and keep our our stop brakes on a lot of things. And staff and everyone has been working very well together and really helps me make my job not as hard, and Sally, because they've taken responsibility for it and done a great job with that. Even though our CARES Act money, which, as a reminder, we got roughly $470,000 for that, and we're able to buy a large piece of equipment for Compass that we were going to have to buy, and we're able for that to qualify. We're able to do a lot of things that were very helpful. Again, one time. That being said, we're still tracking our COVID-19 related expenses that I think could qualify again, or we wouldn't normally make. We're still going to keep track of those in the optimism that we may get another round of funding and those will qualify. Other piece we've explored a couple loans to refinance, since one side of it, we don't get as much interest revenue, but that helps us on the other side of the equation as well. Talked to a couple banks. Really, the best loan that we're going to qualify to refinance is our community house renovation loan, which was in 2017. Its current interest rate is at 3.23. We're quoted around a 2.25. And we have roughly like $950,000 left on that loan. It was a 1.29 when we started 3 years ago. And we would have had a payment penalty. They're going to drop that as well. So we'll probably have roughly a $50,000 interest savings over the life of the loan if we're able to refinance. And that has to go through an LGC process. So that'll come back up again. And as we get closer and go through that, you'll hear information about that. And then we just started budgeting process for another year of COVID. Department has just turned in capital, so really looking at that again in a significantly different lens than a normal year, and then kind of get started on operating budget and really diving deep in how we're going to move forward in this new era of conservative. And not that we're not conservative normally, but how we function and how we move forward and still progress and promote economic development while being fiscally responsible. So with that, any questions?
Any questions? Jesse, thank you for a great presentation. Any questions from council? You're doing a great job. Okay. Next on our agenda are upcoming events. In downtown, a pop-up farmers market at 111 North Green Street on Saturday, February 13th, from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. This time I'd like to call Abby Nelson forward. She wants to talk about downtown Morganton rocks. You're not talking about stones, do you? You're talking about rocking, right?
I've got a fun presentation after Jesse explained some numbers. This is a really fun part. So during the time of COVID, everyone's been hit so hard, especially our businesses. So at the Main Street office, came up with the idea of kind of like you did in elementary school, where you made your own shoebox and decorated it and you filled it all with Valentines. We're doing a Downtown Morganton Rocks, Please Fill Our Valentine's Box campaign. And we're asking for anyone to send a Valentine to their favorite downtown business or business owner. Turn it in on February 10th, and the Main Street office will be sure to deliver those Valentines out to our downtown businesses. If you don't want to buy a card or make a pretty little heart-shaped Valentine to go in here, you can always email us at info@downtownmorganton.com, and we'll make a Valentine for you. But just really wanted to share our gratitude and our thanks to our business owners who really need our support now more than ever. And if you can't support them financially, you can drop a little note in here as well. So just please support our downtown businesses because they rock.
Thank you, Abby.
How many businesses do you have boxes for?
So we're collecting all the Valentines into this one box, but Western Piedmont Community College asked for a complete list of downtown businesses, and in our database, we have around 350, and that's probably a little shy of the actual number. That's just the contacts that we currently maintain.
Great, Abby. Any other questions for Abby? Thank you for supporting downtown.
Thank you so much.
Next on our agenda is the North Carolina Municipal Power Agency. Sally?
Yes, I will report that the rate committee has begun their work for a new budget year, and so sometime in March or April-ish, we will get to hear what rates are going to look like for next year. Preliminary look is that we may be able to hold our own in wholesale rate, which would really help us in helping our customers.
Good news. Thanks. Next on our agenda is the consent agenda. Sally, I believe we have 5 items.
We do, and would ask that the council consider those items in a single motion. For everyone viewing at home, those items include minutes from the January 4th council meeting, setting the date for advertisement of unpaid real estate accounts, and we would set that date for March 17th, 2021. Budget amendments, a couple of those. One in the water fund, we have received from a customer for a meter upgrade that they are requesting $47,864. And then in Compass General Fund and our other intergovernmental service funds, we would do $355,741.26, and that is to receive the last installment of the COVID CARES Act money, the $469,000 that Jesse was talking about. Those dollars have truly been a godsend and have really helped out, and we have done our dead level best to put those toward important things that needed to get done. And I think one of those, and highlight that, is the fact that with everyone working and learning from home, Greg tells you that rule of thumb is, and I'm going to get this wrong, but ever so often your bandwidth for your internet speeds doubles. I think it's like a 2-year period, TAP or something, if I said that right. We saw that happen in a matter of months. And all that with the streaming, with everything that hit, with TV everywhere, with the thing that Verizon offered with Disney Plus and all of those things. And we were able to spend $110,000 of that COVID money to increase our bandwidth almost immediately. And that's the kind of thing that really affects people's everyday lives right now in a big way. So we're really proud of that, as a part of that. That's more than I meant to say about all that, but everybody needs to know. And then, we have done this from time to time over the years as public safety acquires evidence. And in cases, there are times that we seize firearms. And we're required to hold those for a period of time. If they could be returned, then they are returned. If they can't, then there's a whole disposition process that the court system gets involved in. When we get those and they are finally, we get permission to dispose of them, then we will sell those and take a store credit for things that we need at public safety. We have about $8,000 worth of that right now, and Smokefoot Trade and Pawn has offered to hold a $8,000 store credit for us by selling these items that we have seized and that we don't need to have.
Do any members of council wish to have any items removed from the consent agenda? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Next, we'll go to new business, and our first item of business is a public hearing and consideration to permanently close and abandon an unopened portion of Beach Street. We are now in a public hearing. I'll ask our attorney, Louis Veni, to sort of give us an update on this.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is the item that I briefly reviewed for council at the last meeting. A request has been, or a petition has been submitted by the neighboring property owners to close and have the city close and abandon a portion of Beach Street, which isn't in fact open, since part of it actually runs through a building and otherwise through the landscaping in front of that building that you're familiar with when you turn down Beach Street to go back to the farmers market location. It's a building that's been used for various things over the years. The Airlie Incorporated, which owns almost all of the property adjoining Beach Street, has requested that we close that to basically make it conform to what is in fact the facts on the ground. And in return, they will agree to dedicate to the city the appropriate, I believe it's 30-foot right-of-way across what is actually used now as the access to the remainder of Beach Street that then turns down the hill toward the farmers market facility, so that will, the net effect of all this would be to make Beach Street what it actually is on the ground now, but which it isn't legally now. I think that's the best summary I can give you. Anyway, unless the council has a question for me, I think it's appropriate to proceed with the public hearing, which of course is required because you're closing a public street, or portion in this case, a small portion of a public street.
Okay. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak in favor of closing the unopened portion of Beach Street? For or against? Seeing no one, public hearing is now closed, and I will entertain a motion from council.
Motion to permanently close and abandon the unopened portion of Beach Street.
Have a motion, to have a second?
Second.
Any discussion from council? Butch, you look like you've got a,
Well, that's a puzzling situation, but
It is.
handled as well as it could.
we're just trying to make it legal, I think is what he said.
Well, and practical, yeah.
Okay. No further comments. All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Next is a public hearing and consideration of a rezoning request to amend the zoning map designation for 26.83 acres of property located at 410 Hogan Street from high-intensity district to exclusive industrial district. Public hearing is now open. I'll call on Philip Luckadoo to give us an update.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, as the mayor stated, this is a petition to rezone a property at 410 Hogan Street from HID, High Intensity District, to EID, Exclusive Industrial District. And the adjacent properties, this is what you see on the screen is the location of the property. And next map is the boundary where we sent out the notices to everybody within 400 feet of the property. And this is the current zoning. As you see, everything that is to the south of the Norfolk Southern Rail Line is low-intensity district. Actually is high-intensity district, and to the north of the Southern Railway is low-intensity district. The current and historic land uses of the property have been and are continue to be allowed in all industrial districts and most general business zoning districts. The Mission 2030 plan called for this to be a planned destination commercial. which would include shopping services, recreation, employment, institutional facilities, that type of thing. And at the time that that was written, Morganton Heights was actually not developed, which has absorbed a lot of that retail demand. The Planning and Zoning Commission, after much discussion at their January 14 meeting, voted unanimously to table the application and very specifically stated without prejudice, and develop a text amendment that allows distribution centers in the HID. Because the Planning and Zoning Commission did not take action in the affirmative or the negative, but rather to table it, it was determined that it was an appealable action to get this before City Council at tonight's meeting. The ordinance, the zoning ordinance requires that the appeal be made within 10 days. That appeal was made in writing on January 15, and then as per requirements, we advertised for the public hearing that was to be held tonight. Those were in the paper, the Morganton News Herald, on the 21st and 28th of this month. Actually, yes, no, last month, sorry. And then after reviewing the application, or the recommendation or the discussion at the Planning and Zoning Commission, staff's recommendation to the Planning and Zoning Commission was in the affirmative to follow suit with the rezoning request. We do think, after having reviewed the minutes and whatnot, that it is a recommended action that we should take to consider a text amendment to amend HID to allow, with conditions that would be fitting to that type of a type of development in the HID. What they specifically mentioned was distribution centers. So we think that we should take a look at distribution centers, how those fit within the context of HID, and how they can be appropriately developed within that district.
Thank you, Philip. It is a public hearing. Is anyone in the audience to speak in favor of this? I'll ask them to come forward and give their name.
Hello, Council. Alan Wood. I'm President and CEO of Burke Development. Unfortunately, I didn't get read into this quite in time to make the planning board's discussion. I would say that this would be something that would be a good benefit to Morganton and Burke County. Talking with the company, the traffic situation would change very little from where it was when it was actually in operation. Similar number of cars in and out, people in and out. I know it can't be a definite, but there is significant investment in this project, and it would be a company that would use this just for distribution, and none of the other uses that may have been concerned would come into place. I think this would be a very stable operation for this, and outside of the consideration, the jobs that are with it would be very desirable in the community.
Thank you, Alan. Anyone else to speak in favor of this rezoning request? Anyone to speak against this zoning request? Seeing none, public hearing is now closed. What's the wish of council? We will have about 3 motions. What's the wish of council?
May I, Mr. Mayor, may I address a couple things?
Please.
First, the one item, the first motion that is proposed, as Philip said in his presentation, changing the zoning to EID would not actually be in compliance with the Mission 2030 plan. So, and we have done this before in rezonings, if you're going to proceed with this, you would need to find that while it's not in compliance with the plan, a rezoning would actually fit with the general principles of the plan, and as the motion says, that the highest and best use of this property would really be for the uses that are allowed in EID. That's perfectly okay. It's just that you can't rezone property not in compliance with your master plan unless you make that finding.
Right.
I just want to make clear to the public and to council why that's in there.
And we've done that
And we
several
have.
times because obviously
Absolutely.
time passes.
Yes.
Things change, and you can't redo your land use plan
Right.
every 2 or 3 years.
Right, and this is a classic case, as Philip said, destination commercial wound up being at Morganton Heights instead.
Right.
There is one other item that I need to emphasize, since Alan brought that up in his statement, and that's about traffic. At P&Z, they were very concerned about traffic. And one thing that I know city staff has looked at, and this isn't something you have to deal with tonight, but that if this is rezoned, city council may wish to consider changing Hogan Street to bar through trucks on Hogan Street beyond the railroad track. In other words, from the railroad track up to Valdez Avenue, which does connect here. Obviously, the trucks have to get to this location, but the rest of Hogan Street beyond the railroad track is residential, and so you may wish to consider that.
Okay.
Just saying that's something that's out there if you rezone.
At a later date.
Yes.
Would be that consideration. And I do think, because we've done a lot of talking here about this, I do really think that as we look again at an older land use plan and as things change, when you start talking about uses today of distribution facilities and other types of facilities, our land use plan may not take into full account how that industry has changed, along with some other changes. And so I would ask that you really seriously consider concurring with P&Z's request and direct staff and let them take a look at coming back with what would be appropriate to look at distribution centers and any other type use in high-intensity district that really would seem to fit in with that is not included today.
What's the wish of council?
I'll enter a motion to recognize that while this rezoning request is not in compliance with the Mission 2030 Land Development Plan, the current historic use of the property indicate that the highest and best use of this property are within the permissible uses listed with the EID zoning designation.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. I need another motion, please.
Make a motion to adopt an ordinance for a zoning map amendment of 26.83 acres of property located at 410 East Hogan Street from high-intensity district to exclusive industrial district.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Need a third motion, please.
Motion to concur with and request that city staff research and draft an amendment to the zoning ordinance appropriately allowing distribution centers within the high-intensity district HID, and present the proposed amendment to the Planning and Zoning Commission for review and recommendation to city council.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Sally, my question, I guess, or to Louis, this motion will be presented to planning and zoning, and they'll just review it, correct?
Right, because you would be talking about a text amendment. It has to come through P&Z, so it has to go to them first.
Okay.
It'll come through the normal process
Right.
for that. They would do it, and then it would come to you all.
Okay.
You're just requesting the staff to initiate it, which is an appropriate way to proceed.
Great. Have a motion. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Next on our agenda is consideration of a resolution to call for a public hearing to consider economic development agreement and administrative cost for a building reuse grant for Project Glides. I'll call on Sally.
So we are asking you to consider calling for this public hearing at your March 1st council meeting, and would ask that you consider an economic development project for a confidential client known as Project Glides, and asking you to consider calling for that public hearing that will really be about two things. First of all, for this project in city and county, working through Burke Development. There is a building reuse grant that Burke County is applying for on behalf of Project Glides in the amount of $500,000 for an expansion. The city and the county would share in the 5% required administrative match of that, $12,500 each. And then a second piece of this incentive that we'll have the public hearing on would be a local incentive grant, which would be for 50%, up to 50% of the additional new taxable investment for 5 consecutive years for the expansion, and that would begin in fiscal year 2022, 2023. Projections are that the taxable investment, the new investment would be around $10 million. And if you calculated that today, and again, it would create about 80 new jobs. If you calculated that at our tax rate today, that would be about $28,500 annually, and over the 5-year period, $142,500. But again, we will advertise this if you let us do that and call for the public hearing, and you will actually hold a public hearing at the March 1st meeting.
What's the wish of council?
Motion to adopt a resolution calling for a public hearing on March 1st, 2020 at 6 p.m. in council chambers to consider adoption of an economic development agreement for Project Glides. Should that be 2021?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, yes, it should.
Yes.
Good catch. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next on our agenda is the consideration of creating a CDBG CV Code 19 revolving fund. Sally?
Yeah, we have Lisa Helton here too. So part of what you heard from Jesse and part of what you know is that we have received from federal COVID relief dollars, $193,863 in our CDBG fund. And we have a CDBG committee that meets regularly and talks about how to best use our monies. A couple of you serve on that. We have decided thus far we have made some direct aid to nonprofits for expenses that they had to deal with during COVID. We have helped with several of our nonprofits with past due utility assistance to customers, and then also with past due rent assistance to folks in the community. We have about $55,363 that is unallocated, so it hasn't been allocated to any agency. And to better be able to react to requests for that, to be able to do that quicker. And at this point, as we go month and month and month into this, we would like to recommend considering setting that up in a revolving fund so that the agencies that we're currently working with can apply for that money as they need it, and we would have it in the fund and be able to respond to that quicker. In addition to that, and in a second, Lisa's going to talk to you about the 6 agencies that we've been working with and how their spending is going with what's been allocated to them. We would like to set March 1st as the date that all of those monies that have been allocated but not spent yet get accounted for and possibly revert back in, so that if someone's holding money and they're not going to be able to spend it, another agency who could apply for that money through the revolving fund.
We'd like to welcome Lisa Helton, our CDBG guru, and explain this for us.
Okay, good evening. So I think our nonprofits have done a wonderful job spending this money. Like Sally said, we did receive $193,863. So far, there has been $138,500 awarded to the Outreach Center, Olive Hill, the Meeting Place, Burke United Christian Ministries, the House of Refuge, and Burke County United Way. These agencies have either used this money for utility assistance payment, rental assistance payment, or some funds that they needed because they had some extra expenses because of the COVID. So everyone has done a great job spending their money. There is a couple that have a little bit to spend, but they're spending, usually I get something every week asking for the funds. With this pool of money that we'll have, I think it'll be a quick way to get it out to the agencies when they need it.
Questions for Lisa?
You have a memo, too, that we attached in here, and I think it's worth repeating for our community, because, again, this has been a tough time for everybody, and when you think about what local agencies have done to help those amongst us who really needed help, the Outreach Center has been allocated $51,000, and they have spent $51,000. And they have spent it on all three of those types of money: utility assistance, rental assistance, and also some direct expenditures for their food program. Olive Hill has been awarded $31,000 for rental assistance, and to date, they've spent $10,298.75 to help people with past due rent. The Meeting Place was awarded $18,000, and they've spent $18,000. Burke United Christian Ministries has been awarded $21,000, and they do both utility assistance and rent assistance. And to date, they've spent $14,710.19 of that. The House of Refuge, $5,000 was awarded, and they've spent $5,000 towards some extra COVID costs that they had. And then Burke County United Way was awarded $12,500, and that was for utility assistance, and that was directly to help businesses. And they have spent $9,357.52 of their money. So that's it. Again, this is one of the CARES Act distributions that's been a godsend to a lot of people in the community. And we really appreciate the partnerships with our local nonprofits to be able to help the people who need it.
Any more questions for Lisa?
Lisa, is there going to be a limit on requests, or how are we going to handle
I think we
disbursement?
had talked about making $5,000 available to
Each
come first
request.
serve
Yeah,
as they need it. So $5,000, if you need that, we can get that to you pretty quickly,
yeah,
To the agency,
to the
right,
agency.
not to an individual.
right.
Right.
What's the wish of council?
I'll make the motion to set up a CDBG CV COVID-19 CARES Act revolving fund for utility and rent assistance under the guidelines established by HUD with an initial amount of $55,363.
I have a motion. To have a second?
Second?
Any questions from council? Sally, did we need to put in there that the March 1st, 2021 is going to be the date for reversions?
Does that need to be in our motion, or if you tell us that? I mean, we obviously have a set of guidelines set up for the program, which I think we could include with that, if you're in agreement with that.
I think putting a date in is good, yeah.
Okay.
I think if
And now-
agencies don't use it, it needs to revert back so other agencies.
Into this
can-
same fund.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean the same one that if they find that they reverted something and then they have a need, they can come back to the pool again.
Right, but that money will come back into this same revolving fund. then to be
Correct.
okay,
Till it's all spent.
that's great.
I have a motion, a second. Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any approved? No, it's all approved. Okay, thanks so much. Next is consideration of award of a contract for the electric substation and to approve a memorandum of understanding between the City of Morganton and North Carolina School of Science and Mathematics for a utility easement. Sally?
So you are very well aware that for several years, the city has been planning a new electric substation, a new delivery point. This says delivery 6, it's really delivery 7. And that would replace delivery 1, which is the station located on Rand Street near Case Farms. Really old, really small, not efficient, and not enough for us. In this process, you've toured the old station, you've heard a presentation by our consulting engineers about the new station, about what it would be like, about what it offers us for growth potential in the future, all of those things. has to be located somewhere around where delivery one is, and it has to be located on a piece of property that the Duke transmission line that comes through there can serve it. So the perfect place to locate that ends up being on some state property, somewhere in the 800 acres of what we affectionately call the Broughton District. And it just so happens that the perfect spot for that is a smaller piece of property located within that district on property that we very affectionately call the NCSSM Morganton campus. And Kevin is here with us tonight. So we have been working with NCSSM and trying to identify the property that we need. And I might also add that the transmission line that's going to serve this, coming off the Duke line that already exists, is going to sit partially on community college property. And we have talked to them as well, because ultimately we're going to need an easement for them for a line and a couple of poles. That mostly is going to be located within Duke's right-of-way that they already have for their electric easement there. The NCSSM property is a little different. It's outside of that, and it's where we would actually construct the station. In working with our engineers to design and look at this project, there's equipment that goes in that substation that has almost a 40-week delivery time. And we need to get this station built, and NCSSM needs for us to get this station built, and they would like for it to be built before they bring full-time students to the campus. So in order to push this along, we have worked on a memorandum of understanding with Science and Math that you have in your packet, setting out how we will proceed with this and how we will ultimately go to a fully developed permanent utility easement that will be recorded. We just can't get to that stage right now, but we need to order equipment. So, two things I need you to do tonight is consider, number one, the memorandum of understanding, allowing that as any technical changes happen to it, not substantive changes, but technical amendments, that the mayor and I can sign that as Science and Math considers that, and it's going to go to their board of trustees. And then as we get our survey work completed, then we'll give a document also to Western Piedmont for their board of trustees to consider. Then, of course, all those people have to go to state property, and that's another whole dilemma and delay in all of this. So we want you to approve the MOU. We also would like to tell you that on January 21st, in this very room, we had solicited bids and opened those for the equipment into the substation. So there were 8 schedules of equipment in our bid. And we received, and no single contractor bid on all 8, and no single contractor would normally do a turnkey electric substation. So we received 20 different contractors that bid on certain schedules within the 8 schedules, and in and amongst those, we received 27 individual bids. So we feel like we really got great pricing, and there was a lot of competition, and we obviously had a lot of interest in this project, which is exactly where you want to be. Once everything was done, our consulting engineers looked at everything. We are recommending that you also award those bids as detailed in the attached memo from our consulting engineers in your packet for a total of $1,493,069 for equipment. I can tell you that that amount is included for the substation in this year's capital budget. We've talked about how frugal we've been and how we've really tried to be minded to not spend a lot of money, but this is a project that really needs to move forward. So I want to remind you that we received a credit this year on our wholesale bill from electricities through our power purchase contracts. And that is the money that we had identified to be able to move forward with this project, because we are paying for it out of our pocket, so to speak. We are not financing it. And I would like to say that moving forward with this and being able to use that credit, and the total project cost is going to be somewhere between $3 million and $3.5 million, including this equipment. We have still been able to lower electric rates for the last 2 years and use the credit that they gave us to pay for this project.
Great. I need a,
That's all I have to say.
okay. I need a motion.
Motion to approve the memorandum of understanding between the City of Morganton and NCSSM Morganton for a utility easement and authority to allow the mayor and city manager to execute the agreement with any minor technical amendments required.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor, may I add one thing to what Sally was saying earlier?
Please.
Finding an appropriate, suitable location, precise location for this was a huge challenge, and obviously wanted to thank Kevin Baxter and the folks at NCSSM for working with us on this. Sally didn't mention some of the other issues, which are, of course, access. It has to have road access, has to have security. It can't be in the floodplain of Hunting Creek, which is a real problem.
See that happen.
And
Just a
so
problem.
and of course, it has to be a suitable size, space, and everything. So it was, the staff did some great work, and our consultants did great work in ruling out, I don't know how many different sites we looked at. It must have been at least a dozen, in finding a place, and thanks to the good work of NCSSM to work with us, which of course still they have to go through the approval with the state, and there's no guarantee of that, but we have no reason to believe it won't happen.
Yeah, I mean, our other options got down to, basically buying out a business on the Fleming bypass, which isn't an option that anybody wants to do. So really, it ended up working out great, and the fact that NCSSM was willing to work with us,
Good partnership.
again, is a great thing.
I need a motion, please. Oh, you're doing the discussion, okay. Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. I need a second motion.
Motion to award contracts to various providers in various amounts as detailed in the Southeastern Consulting Engineers memo to purchase equipment for Delivery 6 substation in the amount totaling $1,493,069.
Have a motion to have a,
Seven,
Yeah, it's really 7. We messed up the number.
Second.
have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Next is the consideration of an ordinance establishing a cultural arts commission. I'll call on Sharon Jablonski to give us some information.
Oh, gosh, I figured Louis would speak first.
No, we're going to let you.
I'm going to leave out the legalese, though. So I'm very excited about this. One of the reasons I was thrilled with, getting to go to oversee Comma and Main Street and Community House, but also to venture more out into the public with the community, with the arts. And so tonight, I hope that you folks will establish the first ever Morganton Cultural Arts Commission. And the why, it was in the Downtown Master Plan as a great way for us to move forward with public art, which we've all wanted for many years, at least more of. Arts is to more create arts as a sustainable economic driver and to enhance and create more opportunities within the arts. As we learned today through the Arts North Carolina, one of our conferences we were in, there is $200 million in lost income and revenue because of closure of the arts, just like Comma and also artists in general. Some of the initial projects, of course, will be to do the policy and implementation to create some guidelines for proposing public art on city properties, including murals, temporary art, as well as civic arts installations. And so that we one day, I'd love to say, had an actual collection of art. One of our first projects will be to take on the, what we didn't get to do last year, the Poetry Month, which is in April, so that you will see some pop-up poetry in different places that maybe you would never see poetry, and get that in front of other folks. I do hope, I don't know that we will tackle it this year, but we had mentioned to you last year to have a poet laureate. And I could only dream that we would have one at somebody's level of Amanda Gorman. But there are folks around here, and we're very excited about that. So we also want to revive the Cultural Arts District Plan. That was a big deal. It just hit a kind of a left turn. But that is to connect, of course, Common to the Recreation Center and to create a really cool piece down through there. And people still ask me about that. And then something I still hold dear that I want to see happen is Stories of Our Elders, a video project. So that's just some of what we've got planned. I am really excited to say that I have 15 members who are thrilled to take this on. I am also proud to say I have 2 students. One's in college in New York, but because of today's Zoom, she's actually from here. She actually worked for us at the community house. But she's a lovely young lady. We have people from the Latino community, the African American community, the Hmong community. We do have a Burke Arts Council representative. We do have business owners. We do have artists and designers. So I think we have it covered. We're excited, and I hope you folks will be too, and see what we can do moving forward. Any questions?
Any questions for Sharon?
Well, I just have been in several meetings prior to this where the State Arts Council had really encouraged us to consider this and said that as much as we do, that will be very important to our future. And so I'm glad that this has finally come about.
And I will reiterate that this is very different from the directive and plans of the Burke Arts Council.
Yes.
And as you move forward, you will see that. Neither of the two shall meet. But we just, there are things that we can really do to make this a strong economic piece for our community.
But you see that they'll have a seat at the table and be a
Yes,
part of it, because
absolutely.
obviously it's very important how both of these function together for the community.
They will have a board representative, and Deborah will be the ex officio member, who is the director of Burke Arts Council.
Other questions?
Mr. Mayor, I wanted to be on the planning commission for this because, quite honestly, I was skeptical of our need, and I have been convinced this will be a wonderful down the road potential for Morganton. I think it's the step in the right direction, so you convinced me.
That's awesome.
Well, if Butch can be convinced,
That's a piece
that's
of cake.
great. Thank you so much. You were pretty skeptical at one time.
If you'll
so
call the motion, I'll make it.
who would like to make that motion?
I'll make the motion to adopt an ordinance creating a cultural arts commission.
Okay, we have more. We need to be a little more specific. Could you do that?
The names need to
That's
be,
the motion.
that's first, that's a separate one.
I have a motion to establish a commission. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
And may I add one more thing? I know
Sure.
I'm talking a lot, but just to point out that, because I have worked on this with Sharon and Butch and the others, they certainly want this to be arts in the broadest possible term. Performing arts, creative arts, it just, and the broadest possible community outreach. And I think that's very important for the public to understand.
Okay. Okay. The motion is to adopt. Do we have any further discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. I need a second motion.
I'll make a motion to appoint the following members to serve on the Cultural Arts Commission. For terms of 3 years, Allison Dula, Kim K. Inthavong, Julia Mode, Kristen Steiner, and Hamilton Williams. For terms of 2 years, Lorenza Bridges Key, Leanne Britton, Darren Lathan, Courtney Long, and Nancy Van Oppen. For terms of 1 year, Scott Coley, Megan Leideke, and Pensacola Pedro, and Deborah Jones as Executive Director of the Burke Arts Council ex officio. And for a term of 1 year, Daniela Gomez, youth member. As city staff representatives ex officio, Sharon Jablonski and Michael Burley.
Thank you, Chris. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes.
And can I just say, those staggered terms, so we just assign terms so that they can be staggered. So obviously, as we get into this, if, folks want to swap around in some of those terms, we'll figure out how to accommodate that. And ultimately, I think we've set this up that there can be additional members added as this gets going and we find other parts of our community that need to be represented or other folks that really feel a passion to take part.
Thank you, Sally. Next on our agenda is the consideration of a resolution requesting that the North Carolina General Assembly adopt a local bill making certain amendments to the charter of the city of Morganton. I'll call our city attorney to give us some insight.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. This, as you can see from what was presented to you, there are several proposed amendments to our charter. We wouldn't have done some of these if we weren't doing or requesting a couple in particular. Specifically, the provision is probably the most significant to the public, the provision on the appointment of the city clerk. Our charter currently provides that basically the city manager is the city clerk, and so we have this strange thing that Sally is sometimes the manager and sometimes the clerk. And we would suggest that, that as Sally and I have looked at this, and this has been studied, like many towns simply provide that the city manager appoint the clerk, making those separate positions with separate duties set out by law. There are other changes, and you've seen, they're mostly relatively minor, but like all charter amendment changes, they would require a local bill, the General Assembly. We have already contacted both Senator Daniel and Representative Blackwell. They've basically said if City Council wants to make these changes, they'll present the local bill, since it would be non-controversial if the City Council's behind it, and that would be done sometime actually later this month, and action would probably be taken on local bills early spring, we believe.
Any questions for Louis? What's the wish of council?
Motion to approve a resolution requesting that the North Carolina General Assembly adopt a local bill making certain amendments to the charter of the city of Morganton.
I have a motion to have a second.
Second.
Have any discussion? All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any other discussion? The motion is passed. Next on our agenda is an appointment to the Morganton Housing Authority. This is a mayoral appointment, and I am going to reappoint Brian Black and Teresa DeHart to the Morganton Housing Authority for terms to expire February 1st, 2026. Is there anything else to come before Morganton City Council? If not, we're adjourned. Okay.